Hey guys, so I had said yesterday that I wanted to talk a little bit about the financial aspect of like going into business or starting a business or whatever. And one of the things that you need to know is, you got to start somewhere. So starting somewhere can be using assets that you already have. For instance, maybe you already own a chainsaw. Maybe you own a truck and trailer with a winch that you can use to haul logs out of the woods and stuff. And you might be able to start off at that point with that operation, being able to move timber from the woods to your mill. If you don't have these things, then you might have to limit yourself to like let's say you have the sawmill or you want to get a sawmill, you might have to limit yourself to having the logs delivered. In other words, you'll buy them from a logger, have them delivered to your place of business or your mill, and then you have to have the mill. Now, this is where throughout your business career, one of the most important things that I can tell you is to always have good credit. And how do you have good credit? Well, you have good credit by paying your bills. That's what develops it. And credit history is important. Now, in today's world of finance, you got to realize there's a lot of banks out there. There's a lot of people wanting to lend money. There's a lot of risk in lending money, and depending upon how much the lender has, it'll determine how much they're willing to risk. Okay, and some banks are very conservative and don't want a lot of risk at all. I mean, the object of lending is to not have any risk in the loan. But for somebody who's getting started out, think of it this way. Let's say you want to start milling lumber, okay? Now you have to get the sawmill, and if you're gonna, and I'm gonna work with the LT15 because that's what I have, and those numbers are fresh in my mind. So with the LT15, for instance, I'm just going to write down $8,000 here. Now it may be more, it may be slightly less, but let's write $8,000. So in order to get the sawmill, you need to have $8,000. Okay. Now that'll get you basically just the mill delivered to your property. Now you have to realize that you want to keep track of how much things cost. For instance, like let's say to set up the mill might be as little as a day's wages. So depending upon what you're paying, let's say one person can do the setup of the mill for $250 just to set it up. Now we're talking about no concrete here. We're talking about setting the mill basically upright on the ground, maybe with some boards underneath it for stabilizing it, and that's about it. So, the setup might cost you $250. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, if I set it up myself, it doesn't cost me nothing. There is nothing that doesn't cost nothing. I mean, a lot of times I'll say it doesn't cost me nothing for firewood. No, it does. Firewood costs you money. You don't realize it costs you money until you sit down and figure it out, but it does cost you. So that's what we're trying to do here. When it comes to understanding financial stuff, we want to make sure that we have a true understanding of what this thing's going to be. So you're looking at $8,000 for the mill, $250 to set it up. Now let's say you're going to buy a truckload of logs, X size logs, and let's say they're going to be $1,000 for logs. Okay? Now I'm not trying to tell you that a truckload of logs is $1,000. I'm saying this is I'm going to call it a fictitious number for logs. Okay, so we have the mill, we have it set up, and now we're ready to cut logs. So we need to get the logs. So in this simple matter, well, I shouldn't even make it simple. I guess I should go further. So then we want to have, like let's say, these logs are going to take us a week to cut. Now that's, an overstretch, but let's say that. Alright, so you have the wood miser running. It's roughly a 5-gallon tank. I'm going to just guess at this. So you're going to use 5 gallons of gas, let's say every 2 days. So if gas was $4 a gallon, 4 times 5 is 20. So every 2 days, So like say Monday it costs you $20, Wednesday it costs you another 20, and then Friday costs you another 20. So that's roughly $60 a week. So let's say it takes us a week to do this, and it's $60 for fuel costs. Okay, so we have the mill, setting it up, logs, fuel, and maybe some incidentals, and I'll just put $50 down in there for that, because there's not a whole lot that you need once you initially buy the mill to get going. Now, don't ever confuse this miscellaneous with, don't underestimate miscellaneous, okay? Because you can go broke with miscellaneous, or you can make money if there's no miscellaneous. So just keep in mind that miscellaneous is not a non-number. It is a real number that has real value and real cost, okay? So anyway, let me just add some numbers up here. 11, 16, 3, 9. So 9,000, 110, 360. Okay, so 9,360. So let's say it's going to cost you $9,360 to make your mill happen. You know, to be able to start cutting wood. Okay, so it's $9,360. Now let's say you don't have this money, okay, and you need to go and get it. Now, again, we have to say we got to start somewhere. If you're fresh out of high school and you're going to try and do this, and you have no credit rating at all, in other words, you've never borrowed money, you've never paid for a car over time, you don't have a bank account, like a savings account, or any of that, then, you know, it's very possible you're going to have a hard time getting money. But let me just tell you, if you're a young person just out of high school and you've had a savings account ever since you were in 7th grade and you religiously put money into that, and then when you got out of high school, let's say you started a job somewhere and you religiously were saving and putting money into your account, and the banker that you were dealing with can look at your deposit history, and they can see that there's definitely a good thing here because your deposits are much greater than your withdrawals, okay? You're not one of these that put $100 in and go spend 90 right away. You put $100 in, you spend 10, okay? So your deposits compared to your withdrawals, the deposits are much higher than what the withdrawals are, so which it means that you have some money saved. It doesn't always matter that you have $10,000 saved. What matters is that over a period of time, you have faithfully, and sometimes I use the word religiously, but you have faithfully put money into your savings, and you can show that by, you know, the long-term view of your account that you have with the bank. Now, that's not to say that if you save $500 that you're going to give you $10,000. That's not to say that. What I'm trying to say is that's the number one thing bankers look for. They look for repeatability and steadiness in what you're doing. Steadfastness. Now again, it depends on the bank, and you can say, well, I have a friend at the bank and all that. Let me tell you something. I don't care about friends at the bank. Either you're doing things right or you're not. If the person lends you money and you're not doing things right, he's not your friend. Okay? A friend is someone who wants you to get ahead, to do well, and to keep going. A banker who lends money to somebody just because they decided to lend it, that it's not a very big amount, or that you're their best buddy or something, is not really your friend unless they're going to help you with the financial end of it and give you a little bit of advice. Okay, so with that said, somehow or another we got to get $9,360 together. Now, if you have, and again, we're starting, okay, we're trying to start something. So depending upon your age, if you're very, very young, you might have a hard time digging that money up. If you're in your 30s or late, let's say 30 to 40 years old, you ought to be able to get your hands on that kind of money. If you were 40 to 50 years old, you probably got that money in a bank account. It all depends on how you've handled yourself. If you're in your late 50s and you don't have this kind of money saved, then you ought to be asking yourself, what have I been doing with my money? And can I handle a business? You might want to ask yourself that. And, you know, think about that. But anyway, so okay, we need this money. Now, you know, when you're starting out, For me, it was pretty easy because my parents had money, my grandparents had money, and they had business, and I could, draw off of that and, get somewhere, and I was lucky for that. But sometimes when I would start something new, a new venture that they weren't involved with, I either had to have my own savings or had a good credit lines or credit history so that I could borrow money from a bank. Now, credit history it depends on who's looking at it, whether the guy's a good financial person or whether they're just looking at numbers to get numbers in a paper. It's the guy who really knows what he's looking at, the accountant, who knows the difference between what looks good and what does not look good. And a lot of times people write numbers down and they think big numbers mean big amounts of money to lend, and that is not always true. Okay, sometimes big numbers means big liabilities and smaller working capital, smaller amounts of working capital, and therefore you're not really a good risk. But if you have a good amount of working capital and stuff after you get going in business and stuff, then you should be able to borrow money without a real issue. But anyway, we're talking about getting started. So, $9,000 today in this day and age, cars are $40,000, $20,000 for a car, $40,000 for a truck or more, $50,000, $60,000. You should be able to borrow if you have a steady job. And I would recommend that you keep your job while you do this, okay? Try and keep your job and work hard and do this at night and on weekends or when your days are off, or if you have someone else who can run the mill, and then you got to add their costs in here, and that labor's not in here yet, but that's something that you earn. So if you're earning money, you should be able to add money in here later to be able to pay wages. Now, it's hard to get going, and you may want to add wages and things like that into this for, I don't know, I would recommend, if you're in your 40s and older, I would recommend you borrow enough money to do to have working capital for at least 3 months. Especially in the summer months. You don't want to borrow money for winter for doing sawmilling in the dead of winter. You want to borrow that money in like April or May when the season just starts and you can really start doing stuff. There's lumber or timber should be available in April and May, and you should be able to do well. As far as the work that you're going to put out over the next couple of months. So I would recommend that you try to get 3 times whatever your amount would be. So if you're going to have, now we're talking about this taking a week to do. Now naturally it's not going to, but let's say it took you a week. So if you're paying somebody $20 an hour, that's $800 plus the taxes. So you're going to want to put down $800 or $1,600 on here. I mean, if you own this mill and all, there's a lot of things you need to add on here. Go back and look at my spreadsheet about how I do job costing. But the thing is you got to look at it the way I'm telling you. You need to figure out how much money you need to make this operation happen. And listen, it's not always a good idea to take the smallest amount of money. Sometimes, I could go and borrow $9,360, buy the mill, set the mill up, get fuel, have a couple bucks for, miscellaneous for a week or so, only to find out that I can't sell my lumber. I have nowhere to get rid of it. Okay, I can't sell it, and if I can't sell it, I can't pay this back, and then I'm screwed. So you may want to borrow 3 times that, as crazy as this sounds, to be able to get you 3 months, so that in 3 months' time you can get some of the money back. The best thing to do to get started is to know what the mill costs, know what the lumber costs, know where you can sell the lumber after you cut it, or the timber. Know what the timber costs, and then know where you can get rid of it. Okay, that's important. So lining up customers, you can never do that too soon. Just talk to people. Hey, if I can supply you with wood for less than someone else can, would you buy it? Yes or no, and then got to go from there. And sometimes, like in framing lumber, for instance, if you sold framing lumber, you might be against a wall with having it graded, because nowadays, in most places, especially for homes, lumber has to have a grade stamp on it. All right, so that may be hard for you to come up with, although you can hire a person to do grading for you, but then you have to add that in here if that's what you're going to be cutting. But no matter what you cut, try and find yourself an outlet for it, that you can, you know, sell that lumber and know that you're going to sell it at a profit, at some sort of profit. And I talked about that on an earlier video, how much the profit ought to be. That's up to you to work out. But so then you're trying to get started. You know, sometimes it's not bad if you're very young to team up with another partner. I mean, two guys together save money for the winter, and they're both working a job. They ought to be able to come up with $10,000. Two young guys not married. I mean, come on. You know, just don't waste your money. Just hang on to it. So you might be able to come up with enough money to make this happen. If not, and like I said, you have been saving, and you know, you have maybe half of it, you know, talk to the bank and tell them what you want to do. Show them the information. Let them know that you have a buyer. Let them know you know you figured all this stuff out. The more information you can take to the bank and show that banker how much you've put into this, the more faith they'll have in you. Now today, usually credit cards will give you this much money. I mean, you can easily get credit cards that'll give you $10,000. Of course, your interest rate is a lot higher, like 25%, compared to a loan you might get at your bank for 3% today. It all depends on what you have. You know, sometimes business loans are higher, 8%, 9%. But I'm just saying, you know, these are some ways that you can look into this. You may be able to borrow the money from your parents. You may be able to borrow money from a friend. Just make sure you do all your homework so that you're not leaving these people, or any people, no matter who they are, strangers or family, high and dry when it comes time for them to be paid. You know, it's easy to say you're insolvent and you can't pay your bills. That doesn't help them get their money back. You know, and sometimes people will lend money to others. Sally and I have a thing, we do venture capital, and what that means is we lend money to people that have great ideas. Not something like this. We want the idea to be much more beyond this. It has to be better than this. They have to show that they know what they're doing, and we dig deep to find out the information, believe me. But anyway, all I'm saying to you is, you know, maybe you can find relatives, work with some friends, you know, come up with something. A lot of times a partnership might be a good thing when you're doing the lumber, because it certainly is heavy work and two guys are better than one. However, partnerships sometimes don't last. You know, sometimes they don't work and they end up with a falling out. You could have a falling out with relatives. My dad was the type where you borrowed $1,000 off of him and you told me to pay him Friday. You better be there Friday before 5 o'clock, because if the money's not there, he is not going to take no for an answer, and he will do whatever he has to do. And my dad was nobody to fool with when it came to that, and I'm glad he wasn't, because that taught me the seriousness of the matter. Okay? Now, there's a lot of things that people may agree throughout my past, may agree or disagree with me on and how I look at money. I don't really care what they think. I know that I've done well with how I do things, and that is why I continue to do them the way I do. Alright, so anyway, that's one way of maybe getting yourself, or a couple of ways rather, of getting yourself up to the point where you might be able to, you know, get yourself set up to start your business. But these are just a couple of things you need to know. There's more things you can add on here. Again, go back to my video about the spreadsheets, and all you got to do is go on my thing and where the magnifying glass thing is for search, just type in spreadsheet and it'll show up. Alright, so anyway guys, that's it for right now. I'll come back to you in a little bit. Okay guys, so we talked a little bit about finance, the financial, not financial so much, but finance, in other words, borrowing money. That's not all that finance encompasses, but well, most people understand the word finance means to go to a finance company and borrow money. Alright, so then there's something else here that's very important. And in business, this is known as working capital, which is actually, when I was talking to you before about the $9,000 some, that's the working capital you're needing to get going. So working capital, I think that's an A, might be an O. Working capital is current assets minus current, you guys can be able to see this, current, I don't want to put the minus here, current liabilities. Okay, so working capital equals current assets minus the current liabilities. And it's as simple as it sounds. In other words, the money you have left is when you take your current assets and subtract the current liability. That's what you have in working capital. Now, I'll explain working capital to you a little bit. For right now, we're going to take working capital as dollars and cents, actual dollars. It's not, later on I'll show you how it's not actual dollars, but so I'm going to just shorten this up. Working capital equals current assets minus current liabilities. Okay, assets and liabilities. You might be able to see this better like that. But anyway, that's what working capital is. So it would be nice if you could remember this. And it's a simple formula. All it is a subtraction problem. You just got to know what the variables are. So working capital, and working capital is important because how much working capital you have tells you whether you can pay your bills or not. So when you take your current assets and you subtract your current liabilities, that number has to be a positive number. You have to have money left over in order to pay your bills. If you don't have, if the assets minus the liabilities is less than the liabilities, you can't pay your bills. So you have to have more assets than liabilities so you can pay your bills. Okay? Because this can put you out of business in 10 minutes. I mean, all you got to do is get a bill from somebody that's due right now and you don't have the money. You're on the verge of insolvency. And by the way, solvent, I think it's V-E-N-T, solvent means able to pay your bills. Insolvent means not. So I'm going to put down able here to pay bills, not able. Alright? That's simple enough. And again, I'm doing this for people just trying to get started with this. So this is a little bit of information to help you understand, you know, what some of the numbers are about and how things work. So just keep this in mind. I'm going to repeat this again. Working capital equals the current assets minus the current liabilities. Current means right at this moment, the snapshot you took of your business. And to tell you the truth, I used to want to know working capital every single day. When I walked into my office in the morning, from the night before, would be left a sheet on the desk, and it would have the working capital that I have, that I'm starting with for that day, and it would also have the balance in my bank account, checking, savings, whatever, so that I knew what was going on, so that and then I could remember that throughout the day and keep myself going on decisions that I was making. Sometimes I would decide something based solely on how much working capital I had, you know, available. Plus you got to remember these other two variables as well. But so anyway, that's something on finance to get you started. Try and absorb what I have in this video, and once you do that, you should be, you know, you'll be set to start thinking your way through this thing. Alright, so have a good one, guys. Bye.